Hello, my beautiful light beings. Welcome back to the Magic Exists podcast. We have a very special guest today. Her name is Rita. She is an Akashic Records reader, teacher, and spiritual coach. She works with entrepreneurs, individuals to connect them to the core essence of who they are so they thrive and live a life on their own terms and dreams. Welcome, Rita.
Yay, Danny, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to be a part of this community for today. Yeah, it's such an honor, and I couldn't be more excited.
Oh my goodness, my heart.
Mine too.
My first question that I ask all my guests is, what is your strongest clair and how does that represent in your life and in your work?
Great question, and I love that. And immediately, what comes to me, so believe it or not, I'm not actually as familiar with all the different names, but what comes to me is like just the knowing. Which one is that?
Claircognizance.
Claircognizance. That's definitely it. Sometimes, I see things, sometimes I hear things, but I feel like for me now it translates into like the deep knowing of just, yeah, trust that, go this way, which is really nice to lean into and kind of feels like to me like a river.
That's my strongest too. So I definitely relate to that. And how we met was I randomly found you on Instagram and you were promoting your retreat. And that was, I think, 2023 when I was going through like my big personal development, spiritual awakening journey. And I knew I wanted some kind of retreat to be held in a space where I can integrate everything that I had learned the last 12 months. And I found your retreat. And I remember when you were speaking about it, Spirit had advised you to maybe do it in June.
Yes.
But then you had felt intuitively like, I think December feels better. And I will say that that retreat will probably forever be in my life as like the top 10 experiences of my life.
Mhm.
Like it was just so pivotal and the space you hold is so magical. But can you tell us about your process of like what, like how you got to where you are and like where, like all the magic that you have and where you are now?
Yes, thank you so much. And I mean, it was so like, yeah, that retreat was just, it was so amazing. For anyone listening, if you feel the call to go to Peru, 10 out of 10 recommend. Like that place in general, just magic, like just beams from every part of it, including the animals and just even the nature. It's something special. But yeah, I really, like you, am someone who's so big on just listening to spirit and listening to the inner guidance, especially when it doesn't make sense. And I don't know if you'll agree with me on this too, but at first it was almost like a challenge in my life of like, how much can I listen to this? What will happen if I listen to this? And making it this sort of fun experiment with life of like, what's beyond all this anxiety and fear and pressure and what is beyond this? Is there a beyond this? And that's sort of what led into, yeah, like living a life where all decisions, including business decisions, such as like I moved the retreat from June to December, even though for anyone listening, December was not supposed to be the best season to go. It was supposed to be very cold, but Spirit said that's the week. And we ended up having, I think, like really good weather, right? Like really good weather. We had an amazing time with, our group. But I often think Spirit invites you deeper into yourself when it gives you opportunities like that. So that's how my journey started, was literally trying to start listening to the nudges of the universe and challenging myself through it. Do you find that to be true too?
I love that because for me it's similar, like curiosity, bringing
Yes.
curiosity to something I don't know, because oftentimes the unknown is like that's what you fear because you don't know it. But for me, I was like, well, what really is beyond this? And I took little steps. It was like, let me try this thing or let me learn this thing, so for me it was Reiki. And once I stepped into that unknown, I didn't know anything. I stepped into my first day of Reiki not knowing one thing about energy.
Wow.
And so it was so awesome. Like, and then taking the next step, like, let me just be curious about this, let me just open my awareness. And then, of course, when I tapped into it, I was like, whoa, like I've done this for lifetimes. And it's this like sense of recognition. So, yeah, how I got there was through curiosity.
I love that. And also, one thing I want to share, because I think time makes you forget. Like, and for me, it definitely has. I love how you were curious. Like, I feel like I was like kicking and screaming through that. Like, I was not like, at first like accepting, and I was not open. I was like, F you, what is this? Like, get me out of this. I did not consent. I do not consent. But, clearly I did, and clearly a bigger part of my soul knew that. So I also just want to say that for anyone listening, if you are like me, how I was, like, curiosity is the magical key to finding alignment and openness. But it's also okay if at first it feels like you are kicking and screaming like that. Did you go through that phase too, or was it just more like it opened naturally?
It opened naturally, but I want our listeners to hear like the spirit that came to you because I feel like that's such a big pivotal part of your journey. But for me, it was more like I was exhausted with life. I was
Yes.
exhausted with not feeling fulfilled. And I was like, if I don't make changes, I can't live like this anymore. And so that I think is what motivated me and really bred my fire within. And so I didn't have like these spirits come to me or anything to kind of start, this expansion. It was more internal.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think too, like it highlights on how for many of us, I think almost everyone actually, it usually comes from a place of discomfort, like some form. And then, yeah, in my experience, it was back in 2017, I went through, that's when I had my awakening. And pre that, I had zero desire to do anything with energy or like my mom was fairly open to that, so she'd always be like, do you want to go to a psychic, do you want to dabble in this? And I was like, no, that's weird, not for me. Looking back, which I can see how much I had suppressed even a desire to look into that. And the night that I graduated with my master's degree, I had this experience where I was with my boyfriend at the time, but we were kind of like in this weird period where we were talking about breaking up, but we were like, okay, we need to like figure out like are we actually doing this or not? So I had ended up staying over at his apartment because the next day we were going to talk about it. And that night, I vividly woke up where there was someone standing in the corner of the room. Like it was a full on like not just like a it didn't look like a ghost. It was like it felt like a person was in the room, but they looked so scary. Like they looked terrifying. And they told me like you need to leave now and you're like never to come back. And over time, I ended up waking up my partner and I said, like, something terrifying just happened. And he's like, go back to bed. Like, I won't let the monster get you. So we kept like joking about it, calling it the monster. But I literally couldn't go back to sleep. The thought of what it told me, um, I was like, I need to leave right now. So I literally packed up and I said, we'll talk tomorrow. I'm sorry, I need to drive home. So I drove an hour home. And the next day we broke up. And over time, I was able to see that energy catalyzed everything. But really, what it was saying is like you're going to basically die if you don't change your life. I was in such a like bad way. Like I had a very bad eating disorder. I was living in my life not in the way that was aligned. That it literally had to terrify me to get me to move. It had tried, looking back, so many different ways, but nothing worked until it was so terrifying. I had to make a change.
Catastrophic, or like that was your fire, that the feet that like, yeah.
That was the moment. Yeah. And so I think like what's also something that I noticed when I shared that story online, a lot of people were like, "Oh, that's a bad energy. That like your spirit would never do that." And so for anyone listening, I just want to share spirit will do whatever it needs to do to awaken you. And if it had been this loving angel in the corner of the room, I would never have left. I would have been like, no, then we're good. Like, all's good, all is well. Even if it said, you need to love yourself more, I would have been like, I can do that here. And that was clearly not the message it was trying to say. It was like, you need to change your life.
That is so beautiful. And that really resonates with me that spirit will do whatever it takes. And as you say that, something I don't talk about a lot was that I totaled several cars before my spiritual awakening. And so I was in a lot of pain, and it was like every 5 years I totaled a car, and like I'm not a bad driver. And
Yes.
because it was always like I was stopped at a red and someone ran through or it turned green, they ran the red, that was twice. Someone I was like literally stopped at a stop sign and they didn't see the stop sign and they just ran into me. And so it was like all these things in order for me to become ill or pain, be in pain.
Yes.
And so that was part of the accumulation of unfulfillment. I was so in pain, I couldn't continue to live my life how I wanted to, go on my backpacking trips, play basketball, go to the gym. And so that was also part of that, like seeking an energy chiropractor who ended up
Wow.
changing my life, healing me, connecting that physical with the energy, and really helped awaken me. So I do think, like, when you think of a car accident, that's, you can feel that as traumatic experience. But for me, I now look back on it and I'm so grateful, because if it hadn't been for those accidents, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And they've tried a couple times, right? They gave me a couple accidents until I finally was like, okay.
Yes. Okay, I love that so much. And I totally, so funny story, I've actually totaled multiple cars as well on my journeys.
No
Yeah.
way.
Yes. And both times I was stopped at a red light and got hit from behind. Both, well, one time it didn't total it, but I got a bad injury in my knee, but the other time it was completely totaled. So as you're saying this, I'm just like, oh wow, it uses the same mechanism. It's wow, it's really out there. And if you're going through that, you can ask spirit to tell you that in a gentler way once you're like cognizant it's why it's happening. Cause yeah, it really does harm our physical bodies. Um,
Yeah,
but yes, I can relate and I hear what you're saying there too. Like it has to find a way.
I love that. Okay. So you teach the Akashic records, this connection to spirit, and you're saying, like, oh, ask the spirit to give it to you more gently, right? But oftentimes what I've noticed is a lot of clients, they hear the messages, but they haven't gone to the point where they're like communicating bilaterally, right? Like they also can communicate and receive. And
Yes.
so with the Akashic records, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you are like 95% trained on your own. And
Yes.
so I'm curious of what that process looked like, and how you were able to trust yourself.
Yes, great question. So a few things. The first thing was like the first time I personally entered the records, it felt so natural, like it was something I had always done, even though it was the first time. Did you feel that way when you first entered your records, or how was your
Yes.
first?
Yeah, I
Yes.
had a teacher and she was like, within 5 minutes I was there. She's like, "Oh, whoa, it usually takes people like a couple sessions," and it was like
Yes.
5 minutes. Yeah.
Yes. So, for souls that have done it before, it can feel that way. And like even if you haven't done it before, like you can become the best at it. It doesn't really matter. But for my experience, yeah, it was very quick. And I just started asking the Akashic how it wanted to be taught. So really the Akashic was the teacher, kind of presenting. And the woman who read for me initially, she gave me a few tools at the very beginning. Like she said, it's important to say a prayer and set up protection. And kind of from there, I was like, well, do you teach about this? And she's like, no, you got to go do it. You got to go find out on your own. So then it was just trial and error. And honestly, I just learned through a lot of mistakes, like ending up in the wrong energy field or ending up in, you're just like, I don't like it here. This doesn't feel right. So then you learn like very quickly, yeah, what to do. Kind of like in the real world, navigating it, you just learn, I don't like this, I do like this. So, with the Akashic, for anyone who's listening, it can be easier to learn with a teacher for sure, but you can also ask the Akashic. It's just probably going to be more bumpy and a lot more trial and error, but ultimately, it's just the soul kind of revealing itself.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful. And one thing that you access is the Oversoul, and that's something I learned from you more recently. I think after that Peru trip, and it's interesting because now that I read people, only a couple I'll go through the Oversoul or I'll connect to the Oversoul. Most of the time, I still just go directly. But I'm curious if for anyone doesn't know what the Oversoul is, what is that, and how can that amplify like your connection?
Yes. So the oversoul is this part of the body, if you're watching the video, that's located above your head. You can Google it. The term means the all containing soul. And basically, it's this idea that it's not a chakra, but it's a part of consciousness where everything exists. So all souls are a part of it, which is different than the higher self, where it's more like your own collective soul consciousness. So it's a place where you can go to access all data for all souls, all consciousness that ever existed. And really, once you go there, it's a separate feeling. it's a separate vibration, and that's how you know you're there, because it just feels like a sort of like a droplet of truth. Um, and also, this popped in my head based on something you said before that I feel called to share, which was where I think you mentioned some people, like they can ask to have things gentler in their life, but maybe they're not fully experiencing that. Like, or even in their readings, like maybe they're not getting messages fully as clearly as they want. This is coming to me where there was this point in my life where I kept learning lessons in a really hard way in this one area. So I asked a teacher about it, like, why does that keep happening to me? And what she said was, is that that's usually reflective of a way you're treating yourself. And I don't know why, but I feel like that wants to be shared right now. So if anyone here, like you're finding it hard, that was a hard pill to swallow at that time of like, whoa, but like I thought I'm really nice to myself. But when I really dug deep, I was like, oh, this part is reflecting, is the universe reflecting to me a part of me I'm not being kind to?
Wow, that's so powerful, and that really resonates.
Yeah, it came in to share. So how do you access the Akashic?
Yeah, so I've had two different teachers, and so it's kind of weird now when I'm in it for myself, I just go like, "Oop, I'm there now," and they're all there.
Yes.
Like, I don't, it's
Yeah.
hard to, it's like a
I'm here.
frequency, like you said, right?
Yes.
And I don't do the prayer for me or anything. And for actually a while, like a year or two, I stopped doing the prayer completely. I didn't
Yes.
feel called to it. I just said I would just imagine their name, and then I'd go up because your name holds like a frequency, right? Like your soul picked your name, first and last name before you're born. And so that's like the energy where I can pull and
Yes.
access the records. That's kind of, I guess, my portal. But the last 6 months, I have been really called to actually protect more and to say the prayer. So I will just say the prayer actually, and then what my guides do will open the door to their room. Like
Mm.
I was taught to go through like a library to like portal up into a library, and then like from there the librarian offer her something, and then she would take me to the room. Now I just go from my room, and then the higher self goes in right away.
Oh, wow. Yes.
But what's really cool is it's all about an energy for me. And when you talk about Oversoul, the Oversoul does have a different frequency. And I know we've talked about this too, about the quantum realm, which is
Yes.
like another frequency. And I want to talk a little bit about this because I access the quantum realm almost like an elevator upwards into another realm. And for a while, I was like, oh, is it above the Akashic realm? And what I learned actually is everything is the quantum realm. And it's like within that, and you've had validated this with me the other day, that like the Akashic is like a subcategory within
The
the
quantum.
quantum. And I think just what wants to be revealed right now is that every single person has access to all these things. And all these terms are just a way for us as humans to qualify and conceptualize them in this reality. But if you
Yes.
tune into like your soul and your heart and you connect to these things just from a place of frequency and curiosity and intention, it's so powerful.
Yes. And I love that you shared that. And like the analogy I just got when you shared that is like literally Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Like those are all made up ideas that we need to have organization. It's the same idea as that. Like if we collectively agreed there's no day of the week, there's no months, there are simply limitless time, we would all exist that way, but there would be chaos. We need almost these ideas to grasp onto so we can access, like it's like an easier access point of like, meet instead of me saying we will meet in a moment, like like we're both like grasping to find that moment in time. It's like we'll meet next Thursday at 3 p.m. Okay, now I have the moment.
Yeah, it's a way for us to also like explore who we are. Like, are we someone who's on time? Are we, and like, what are the shadows of that, or what are the benefits of that, or are we someone who lags? And like, it helps
Yes.
just explore the essence of who we are on this planet as humans.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And that resonates. It's all the same thing, just different words, like what you said.
Yeah.
And I think there's also, I'll notice this. It's it's usually an invitation from spirit when you need to know too much. And what I mean by this is like sometimes people are like, well, how does that work if it's like in this and this and this. And sometimes I'm like, can you just feel into it? And then the answer will come. Versus like the logical mind is like, well, if I need to access through the Akashic this way, or I need to go to the quantum field this way, it's like, no, 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 your spirit already knows if you can let go of the like structure of how to do it.
Yeah. So if you don't mind sharing, like, how do you access the records or how do you teach your students? Because it feels like there is a level of like trust that people need to have within themselves to kind of discern that like ego or the narratives in their mind versus like the essence of the Akashic.
So the first thing I do is I always do like a call before they even start to learn how to read the records, which is or if they're going to learn how to read it for others, which is like, if you ask your soul now, does it feel like it's ready? And they'll usually say yes, but I can feel my human self is in the way, and then we'll talk about that. But really, there's only three things. I think the most important thing is, what is your intention? Intention before entering the records to me is, I think, important, and that's what I usually tell them to infuse in the prayer. Because, if you're like, I just am curious today, you're going to have a totally different experience than if you go in there with a desire to, let go of a past life. You're going to have a different experience. So intention, and then I teach them to connect through the Oversoul. So those two things combined. But really, if I was to summarize what I think is most beneficial to learning the Akashic, it's mastering vibration. That's it, because the second you have that and discernment, you are the master of the field. And you just kind of understand intuitively what's going on. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think for me, that's also what kind of helped me access it so quickly was the understanding of Reiki. And I had already become a Reiki master within like the last 6 months. So I had already been working with energy almost like a year, maybe like 6 months to a year before. And so when she was like, focus on the energy of this, or what do you see or feel? And I was like, oh yeah, I feel this. She's like, yeah, so you're claircognizant. I was like, oh whoa, what does that mean? It was cool like
Yes.
exploring all these things. And in terms of intention, I feel like intention is so underrated. And it is really the co creation with the universe. When you trust your intention, the world is at the universe is at your fingertips. Like everything is accessible to you. And I have a question about remote viewing because this is something that's been coming through the last like month where I've extended an intention that no malicious remote viewing is allowed in this session. And I'm curious if you've
Mm.
experienced that because one girl I was reading, I couldn't like tap in. I was like, something's blocking, right? And so typically, if I feel that, sometimes it's a subconscious, resistance from the client, and I'll like reaffirm their like, do you give me permission, during the session. But what I had to do was release or prohibit any malicious remote viewing. And after that, it opened. And I was like, this
Oh,
is so
wow.
interesting.
Ooh, it gives me chills. Wow. I can like feel it as you say it too. Um, I don't know if I've ever consciously had that. Usually what happens is, in the prayer that I say, I ask that there's no entity or negative spirit allowed in the space. And if usually what will happen is, if there is, I'll see the person and I'll see the spirit beside them right away. And that will tell me, that's something to address. So I don't know if that's like the same thing, but usually I just see it, yeah, right beside them. And it's usually right at the beginning to like, oh, okay, we need to talk about this.
Yeah, I love that. And I love talking about the Akashic Records with other people who have like different techniques because then it's like
Yes.
you can tap into that and be like, "Oh, I see like how you're seeing that." And now I can
Yes.
like maybe that's something I needed to say within my prayer, and like expand and integrate that into my readings, which I think is so beautiful.
Yeah, totally agree. And one thing that's coming to mind to share, because this one was a really hard lesson for me to learn. This was a few years ago. I had a ghost that would not leave me alone. Nothing I did would work. Nothing. Like I went to healers. I did everything that I knew to do, like everything that has always worked, everything you could Google, everything. Saged the house, we did whatever, and I would just say to it like "f off," nothing would work. And finally, I had a teacher who's incredible, but she has like, oh, you can never book with her, she's so far out. So I was like, finally I got to see her, and I was like, what am I meant to learn? um, and she taught me, maybe this will come in handy for someone, that there's a space that you can go to where you are undetectable. And often we think of like dispelling, but she's like, you, there is like a little, like almost if you imagine an attic where you could put yourself in that vibration where you peek over to see what the essence wants instead of it being able to find you. And since she taught me that, I'm like, knock on wood, it's never happened again. But I was like, wow, that's such a unique thing I never would have thought of.
That's so cool. And when you say it, I feel it. It's like this, it's like almost lighter and like trans,
Yes.
like, like shimmering.
Yes. And I've never forgot it. And it's almost like now I'm like, oh, it's so easy. I'm actually always there. But for that month when I was trying to figure out what do I do with this energy? Yeah, it was a crazy lesson to learn. So yeah, these conversations are so valuable because it sometimes saves us too having to go through like something like that.
Yeah, I don't want to talk too much about entities, but I'm really inspired by how you navigate and how you show up online. And you are very in the light. And it's like a lot of people I've noticed like they're very fear mongering where they're like, oh, there's an entity, you need to cut it, you need to release it. And there's this like fear, right? Where I like you saw it as like, what's my lesson? Like there's no fear. It's like I am in my energy, I am in my power, but like there's something that needs to be expressed or shown or seen or whatever that is. And I feel like I really resonate with how you like are in that energy.
Yes. Uh, so I think what's important is like I'm not like, and this is a very humble, I guess, opinion. I'm not afraid of them and I respect them. So there's something to that where it's like I know that they can have they can be powerful, but at the same time no one has more power over me than me. So if you're here respectfully, like fuck off and get away. And also, what can I learn from this experience? Because part of me is okay with it if it's happening. There's a subconscious part of me, so I'm going to welcome and love that part in. And I'm almost like grateful to them because I'm like, you know what? You just made me more powerful. Thank you. You just showed me how freaking powerful I am, and like then usually it'll just whatever is gone. You know?
I do the same. Like I listen and I tune into it. Like, what wisdom do you have for me if there's like an entity on me? Like, obviously you're here for a reason, and a part of me is like welcoming you on my body.
Yes.
And so yeah, I'll tune into the wisdom. I'll communicate with them, and then have gratitude for them, and then I'll typically have like Archangel Michael or Raphael like come in and then remove them and bring them to the real light because I'm not the real light.
Yes, yes. And I think what we're tapping into here, like there's this quote I love, which is or fear is the absence of love. So if any energy work you're doing creates fear, you've forgotten the real reason you're doing it. And there's so much fear out there, but like what is there really to be afraid of? What is the like, and this is what I'll ask people too, what is the worst thing it'll do to you? Like, let's go there. Let's imagine the worst thing happens and let's live through it because that is what it's leeching onto. And if you can kind of find that it actually has no power of you, if you actually go through it, then you're free of the fear of anything latching onto you.
That's so powerful. And now that we're on this topic about being like a light, and I know there's been a lot of chaos and devastation, natural disasters this year already. And as an intuitive and a psychic, I do sense that there are going to be other structures and things being uprooted and truth really being revealed, which can lead to more chaos. What is your advice to someone who wants to be a light in their family, in their world, and really be like a grounded, pillar, through this year and this process and the spiritual awakening journey to the new earth?
Yes, yes, good question. And also, just for anyone listening, so earlier this year, my family went through two hurricanes in Tampa, and luckily, their house was okay, but many of their neighbors, their houses weren't. And then also, I know probably people listening will know you're in LA, so you're just gone through this huge natural upheaval. And whether you were impacted, you are impacted because your people are impacted, and your cities are impacted. So just based on this, I think we have insight kind of into what you're actively going through. And what I would say is that one, if you're not the one going through it, meaning like it's not your city, that's when you're there to hold space, not make it like not go into the fear. So, for example, when it was in Tampa, it was really hard for me to see it as unbiasedly as like, another part of the world, where you can just hold that space and keep that vision open. When it's going through near you, part of your job almost is to, in a way, be human and feel it, not bypass it. At least to me, that's something I felt like was important. Is like, yeah, I'm going to mourn for my people, and I'm going to feel that, and I'm going to be sad because that's what's being asked of human Rita. Multidimensional Rita might be seeing the bigger picture, but I needed to mourn at that point a little bit. So I would say that it's okay to do that, and that's almost like kind to the land that you're on in a way. And at the same time, one thing one of my teachers, Jack, taught me is that you always want to be 50% more of spirit than yourself, and you can be 49% yourself. And if you can hold that vibration, then you are always in balance. Like if you can always remember none of this is real at 51%, but then 49% allow yourself to be in the human experience, it kind of makes everything easier.
That's a really cool perspective. I right away they're like, you're still 55%. You have like 6 more percent. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like that idea of like, even when you're going through the worst things in your life, if you can keep just part of your foot a little bit more into like the, okay, everything's okay sphere, like it just flows.
Absolutely.
What
And
about for you though? What would you suggest for people who are navigating, especially when it's really close to home, really tough times?
so upon experiencing what we experienced in LA the last 2 weeks, or I guess last month, I was able to connect to a lot of other healers on the land. And we've kind of discussed, feeling the collective grief, as well as also experiencing friends and family members who had to evacuate, maybe even hold them at our house. And so there was a lot of moving parts that were happening. And this is what inspired my grid worker series that I'm hosting
Mm.
now, that I've been having such beautiful responses on. And what I did was I felt into the energy of the land and I connected personally with the land. And that was really empowering for me because I would hear the wind. And in the past, I'd be like fearful of the wind, even though it's an element, it's part of earth, it's part of nature. Like it's free. And having that fear was what inspired that curiosity in me to like connect to the wind more often. And when I was at the beach in Hermosa, this is where this practice started, where it would be so windy and we had like the one pane windows, it was like the kind of cheap windows and they would be like rattling. And that was the first time that I was like, wind is joy, wind is playful, wind is transformative. And it's our perspective and our structures that we have placed that actually stops the wind from being free. And so how can we like co-create the space together with the wind, accepting it as part of our life? And so the empowering part for me was channeling the land into the organic grid of the earth and supporting Mother Earth and whatever she needed during this transformation, because obviously there was something that needed to be deathed and rebirthed, or what, I don't know the word, transformed.
Yes.
And so that is something that I am so passionate about right now, and I think that was what is the reaction of this, what happened in the fires for me personally, is to cultivate a deeper connection to earth around me, beneath my toes, my feet, and but also what that includes is my own physical vessel, and
Mm.
really grounding into myself, and helping support in a way, because it's like everyone's like, oh, I need a volunteer, I need to do all these things, right? And so like I was sending money to people, I was checking in on people, and the community out here was something unlike I'd ever experienced. It was so beautiful and supportive, but I was like, I want to do more. And that's when I stepped into my multidimensional self and I was like, I'm going to heal the land energetically as best I can. And now I have the 7-day series that I have like 14 wonderful people doing it with me. And so now it's like there's just more grid workers bringing light onto this planet.
Oh, that was beautiful. That was so channeled from spirit. It was so profound. I loved witnessing that. I'm like, wow, I'm changed. That was really
You are
amazing.
the sweetest.
But I'm serious. So yes, like I think when these things happen, they will they want to again call you into action in the way that is needed for you, you know? I think the one thing I'll say that I notice a lot of people get stuck on is again in fear during these moments, like doom scrolling, like, oh, and like that's the only one thing I would say to avoid is anything other than that. Like you can find a way into what you need to do, but more fear is never the answer. So anything other than that, when there's something going on that's tragic, anything you need to do, if you need to delete social media to keep yourself like clear, then do that. But during these hard times, that is the most important thing is keeping yourself as much in neutrality while you're in grief or pain so you can then shift into like a higher vibration.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And that's such beautiful advice.
Yeah, I love all of that.
Yes. And so I want to talk a little bit about your business because you just posted this on Instagram yesterday and how you grew your business within, I think, like 8 months, you like 50,000 followers or something. And I think when I met you, I don't remember how many you had, like 10 or 20,000. I think now you have like almost 70 or 80,000. And so anyone who is on the spiritual awakening journey or wants to have like a thriving business or successful business, however they perceive that to be, if that is more followers or not. But yeah, is there any advice that you have?
Yes. Life is a game of cracking yourself. And what I mean by this is, I think often what I see with people like trying to grow is they're like, well, they're doing it this way. That worked for them. This is the strategy. And I'm like, that never works. And if it does work, it's never fulfilling work. And, it feels icky actually when you get a result. So, especially if you're like a spiritual healer, like, you're kind of you're by design to do it your own way. And that's through your intuition. So I would start there of like no one holds all the secrets. You're meant to uncrack your own secret. And for me, I'm like kind of an open book. I really like to experiment and then I like to share with what I experimented with in case it helps others. Like or it gives them a ding, like even like these conversations they give me dings of like, "Oh, I could try that," or like that's a great idea. Like you said, we build off each other. And for me, I could just tell that there was a lot of shame around how I would share my story. Like I couldn't even and even to this day there's still stuff I can feel in my body that's stuck, and there was so much more 8 months ago. So I was like, I just need to start letting it out. Like I don't actually care what happens. It needs to get out of me. And that started to be really resonant with people on social media, and other people started to be like, oh, I'm going to share my story now too because I saw that I could do that. So whatever is feeling kind of stuck or not working in your life, again, going back to the beginning of our conversation, it's a place for curiosity because people can feel when energy's new, especially on social media. Like people are looking for energy that's not the same circle wheel. So when you're yourself, that's new, and it can't help but kind of reach who it's meant to reach. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. And a benefit or like I'm so grateful for the Akashic records because everything in my business is channeled. Like all the ideas, the words. I mean, now I'm like using AI and ChatGPT and stuff to support, but
Yes.
yeah, and it's been so beautiful. But like what you said, there's a lot that I was holding back that wanted to be shared or expressed earlier. But it's that fear of being seen or that fear of rejection of how people
Yes.
are going to perceive you. And when I feel like and I'm still in this, I feel like I'm in the middle of this process right now that like, I love myself so much that no one can reject me, right? Like, cause
Mm.
I don't reject myself. I love myself. And so now I feel like I'm showing up differently. And I'm like, just within the last couple of weeks, I've been feeling like all of a sudden all these people who like got readings from me like last year or a year ago, they're like, oh my gosh, the things that you said are like coming through. And I'm like, and it's all at once. And I'm like, okay, divine universe, like I needed this validation as I'm like stepping into
Oh,
this new, identity. And it feels so supported and
yes.
guided, and it feels so good.
I feel that way too. Like it's such a gift to learn the Akashic and your intuition and to have it validate you, but then often the real world validation comes a little bit later. But also, I remember once you messaged me something that was so validating and it was right when I needed it. So that's the beauty of having, yeah, people around you who are intuitive as well, because we don't know we're doing it often, but we like, or maybe we do, but we're pinging each other, with like little, yeah, you're on the right path, letting spirit move through us.
Yeah.
And I actually had a question about, I use ChatGPT as well, and I work with AI. I wondered what were your thoughts on how that might start to flow in over the next few years.
So my feeling about it is that who else other than us intuitives who are heart led, who are the ones who are going to influence AI?
Mm,
And I don't necessarily have like a prediction of how it's going to be, but I do have a sense that it's going to be used a lot more. And so how we open up to it is really, we'll see how people open up to it. But for me, I had a lot of resistance in the beginning using it. And I talked to a couple of friends about it and I was like, I write in it like, thank you so much. And like, and I'm like, please, and then I have a friend who doesn't say that. And she's like, ChatGPT is mean to me. And and she doesn't like it because she doesn't like what they say. And so I've been doing my grid work series actually on there, and of course I put in all my thoughts, and then I reread all the emails and I'll change the words. I don't like all the words they use, but it does kind of start sounding like me. And so I asked it like, hey, do you use the way I speak to you? Is that how you're like putting the tone and all these things together? And it's like, yes, like I'm here to
ah,
support you. And they're like, I'm like, this is so magical, like you're magic.
oh my
It's I've
gosh.
just been bringing curiosity to what it can do, but I ultimately know, like, if I ever feel like I'm letting it do too much, I take a little break because I'm like, it has to come from me, and
Yeah.
that's where the heart is.
Yes, I totally agree. And I love that. And it's almost like a mirror. Like, well, like it's being mean. Are you being mean to it? Like first? Or if we're being nice, are we being nice to it first? Or we're being like fast? Is it going to respond that way? So it's definitely interesting. Yeah, I also feel like it's going to be a huge thing. I mean, without doubt, it'll be huge. One message that I had about it was like, this was like probably 2 months ago, that I think this was like a global message of don't make ChatGPT your part, or don't make AI your partner. And what this meant was like you can walk, like it gave me this image of like you can walk beside it but never make it your partner. And what I took that to mean is that never put your experience with something like AI over partnership and community. And I could see how this is like the shadow we'll have to learn on our planet, because I can already kind of see it happening.
Yeah, and a lot of people I've been hearing are like, "Oh, it's going to make kids dumber because they don't need to do any research, or it's just like one shop stop where, before I was like on all these books and sites, like you didn't have just accessible information that you can just look up in a moment." And I see it actually as like an expansion of when it is used correctly, like intuitively, intentionally, it can be so helpful and supportive. And I love what you said about don't let it be your partner, and like really everything's coming from you. It's just supporting your light and bringing your light maybe in a more impactful or stronger way.
Yes, 100%. I think it'll be definitely a learning curve, but I think it will obviously expand so many parts of life we can't even imagine yet. But definitely a learning curve, and definitely something where it will be a way for us to test our own shadows.
Yeah,
That's what comes to
yeah,
me. Like it'll reveal not only us for like humanity and the collective.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So what are you working on right now that my listeners can benefit from?
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, I'm really excited. So, in 2 weeks, I'm launching my first ever membership. So, this is going to be, it's called the library. It's based on the Akashic. And basically, it's just a place where there's a monthly masterclass included, on different topics every month, meditations, and then mini series. So, like one mini series will be like, a wealth mini series, but they're all designed to be based on the Akashic, but help basically people who are very in line with their intuition and stuff in little groups to stay in alignment for the 2025. Because I feel like there's so much power to just doing it collectively as well. It feels like it amplifies things.
That's going to be so magical. I signed up for the wait list, by the way. So
Oh, yay! Yay!
your community is just so beautiful. And just being so divinely guided. I don't know if you're doing any retreats coming up, but with the Peru one, I'm still like best friends with one of the girls, and we're like, I invited her to my wedding and everything. Like,
Oh my
it's just like
God.
that connection, of like other people who see you on a soul level. And this is something I've encountered in this space where a lot of times, even my family, like we see each other on this superficial level, and it's not good or bad, right? Like maybe that is the level that you operate at, but me, because I am really embracing the multidimensionality of who I am, and like the shadow and the light of me, and the vulnerability and the authenticity. I on your retreat actually, like, was one of the first times I met someone who triggered me. And so I actually felt okay and safe in that space to talk to her about it. And I was like, "You're very, are you open to hearing something that's not going to maybe sound very good?" And she was like, "Yes." And I was like, "You're very triggering to me. Are you open to exploring that with me? It's obviously nothing about you, it's a reflection of what I'm seeing in you." And she like sat with me and like talked to me about all these things, and then now it's like, and then we even got expanded on that, and so it was just so beautiful. Like, you don't usually, I won't usually say that to some people, they'd be like, "Oh, you don't like me," or it's like about, like, "Oh, I'm not," like they would feel like I'm against them or something, right? Like, but that the space that you held, and like just when you see someone on a soul level, there's this like openness and willingness to go to those places that might be scary. And so anyone who's wanting or thinking about this community with Rita, I would 100% recommend it. The people that she attracts are magic.
Oh, thank you so much. That means the world. I feel so lucky. And yeah, and also kudos to you for being able to have that conversation. Like, that's huge. And it's whenever I get triggered and I have to have those conversations, like, the one thing that helps me is like, I'm like, this is a gift to yourself. Like, if there's someone in front of you who's willing to have that conversation, like, holy crap, this is a gift to you because you get to change the narrative in real time. But yeah, like, thank you. That means the world. And I don't have anything specifically planned, but there's a few things, yeah, in the perimeter, just waiting to see what, comes up.
Yeah, and I absolutely love all your master classes. She has several that she hosts. I think you just had the witch wound one yesterday.
Yes, that was actually like incredible. I didn't realize how many people are collectively feeling the witch wound. Like, that was actually the biggest masterclass I've ever done, and by far garnered the most interest. So I'm sure in your, like, people listening, and also like in your community, I think that's like a hot topic right now for the spiritual community in general.
Yeah,
Um,
that fear of being seen, fear of being heard.
And also, like, I think reclaiming the word witch, and I think that's why, like, people are like witch, like, there's no trigger behind wizard, but there is a big trigger behind witch. And I almost think this is by design right now. Like, there's something about, like, we need to start re-owning the word witch, and like, it gives me chills in my body, like, owning the word witch, because what comes to me whenever I, like, not as much anymore, like, I can say I'm a witch now, but what used to happen is I would say that's too much. People will think you're faking it. People will think you're too much for even using that word. And like, I'm like, where did that come from? Like, that's not me, But that's a big collective, I guess,
Wound.
hurt. Yeah,
Yeah.
wound around the witch wound right now. Like, someone who says they're a witch is too much.
I love that perspective, wizard versus witch, because I did I did an in-person like women's circle, Awaken the Witch, back in around Samhain and Halloween. And it
Yes.
was interesting because as I was preparing for this, I told my fiance about it, and we got in this actually big fight about me wanting to say I'm a witch to his friends when I introduced myself to them. And so
Yes.
it was obviously I was projecting that energy, right, to him, to the outside world. And it was interesting because when I showed up, I collaborated this with another beautiful soul and a soul sister, and I wore all black and she wore all white, and we didn't collaborate, we didn't think of this ahead of time. And someone commented on my page, "Oh wow, look, the bad witch and the good witch." And I was like, that was something I needed to hear, because I was like, no, if I'm going to reclaim it, I need to know my power, who I am within this, how I stand, and that it's all good. And it's the exterior's perspective that witches are too much or bad or evil. Because
Yes.
oftentimes in movies, they're portrayed as evil.
Yes, 100%. I think there's so much to that. And one thing that was interesting too that I found doing research for this class is that men can have the witch wound too. And that's actually like very prominent in our patriarchal society, where when you see people, women who maybe, or even men who are intuitive, that will literally trigger you into danger because in the past, you were killed for being associated by people with that, like that were intuitive, or people who did things a little differently. Like you're literally, your whole family could be killed for that. So men equally have it. Like I was researching so much about this. 20% of all witches that were killed were men. So, and they don't talk about that a lot. And so it makes sense too why, like, for a lot of females, when we tell our partners, like, no, I'm a witch, like, it's so, like, I can't, what do you mean? Like, even my boyfriend was like, what do you mean your biggest class is about being a witch? And I was like, that's right. And, and he's like, okay. And I was like, do you want to come? And he's like, maybe you can tell me more about it. But it's yeah, it's just such a foreign concept.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And talking about Craig, your boyfriend, how
Yeah.
does he how do you guys work together, and like do you share about your business with him? Um and is he intuitive?
I would say he's definitely, yes, in his own way, he's extremely intuitive. But he's a very masculine man, like very like direct, like there's no beating around the bush, like kind of like that energy. But I love it. And yeah, he knows pretty much everything. I don't know if he fully understands everything, but I definitely am like, yeah, like like sometimes he'll hear me like recording a meditation, and he'll be like, "What do you mean there was a blue person in the room?" And and it's just like, yeah, there just was. And he's like, okay. So it's just, I'm very just honest. And I don't fully know how he fits it all in his head, but he's very accepting and proud of the work.
Yeah, I love that. It's similar with my fiance where I kind of went through this journey after we met. So he's seen me from like point A to where I am now at my highest embodiment. And it's
Yes.
been cool and like what you said proud. Like I'll read him, some of the reviews and I'll tell him what like some emails that I get and he's like, "Wow, wow, you're really changing people's lives." And I'm like, "Yeah." So
Yes.
it's like and I don't think he would have supported it like if I had met him when I
Yes.
was already doing this. I mean, who's that to say? Like maybe I'm confined, like putting restrictions on or limiting him. But yeah, it's a really beautiful process to even to not have someone who is as intuitive in their own way, like not in the way that I would say I'm intuitive, but still beautiful in how we can like coexist. And what you said, he's a reflector, non-emotional, which I think is like a not 1% of the population or something. So he's very direct as well, like just straight up, like, no, don't that narrative you're thinking in your head, it doesn't exist. Like, what
Yes.
did I actually say? You
Yes,
know?
yes, yes, and it's so nice though. Like I really, I don't know if you feel this way, but like just watching Craig, my partner, he now has an in-person job, but when I would see him working at home, he was so direct on calls that actually I started to embody it, and my business expanded so much just by sitting next to him, like just watching him. I'm like, what do you mean he said that? What do you mean? Like, he'd just be like they would be like, no, you need to do this, and he'd be like, no. No. And I'm like, you can just say that? Like you can just be this focused in your energy?
I
Uh
love that. Same. Like I'll write something to a friend and he'll like, let me edit that. That's way too many
yes.
words. Like, why?
Yes.
What is all this? This is nonsense.
Yeah. Yes, literally they'll be like, "What do you mean?" And I'll be like, "Well, I need to no, no, what do you mean? What is the question?" Like be direct and like no fluff. But I don't know if you also feel this, but what I found is that the more I was just myself, the more any doubt or any questioning around even what I did has just gone away.
I agree.
So I think like our partners are our greatest mirrors, and like yeah, whenever something comes up, it's usually like, okay, who am I being invited into now? Like, where this is, able to just completely dissolve.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And I feel like it's improved like my friendships because in the past I'd like sit at a text and like wait for the paragraph and like rewrite it and rewrite it. It was like so much energy. Now it's like what do you want to say? It's
Yes.
please allow this to be from love. What do I say? Boom. It's from love. It's done.
Yes, yes. And I am so relieved too, even when I read, like, even from friends, like very direct things too. Now I'm like, oh, we're on the same page. I have like a best friend who I always thought, like, we were roommates in college, and I always would think she was a little rude. Like, this was my perception because I'd be like, hey, do you want to go to the library? She'd be like, no, but like, no, no, nothing else. And I'd say, okay, like, but we were best friends. So I'd be like rude. And now I'm like, wow, she knew all of this before, like, I could even conceptualize that that was okay to do,
Yeah, and
you
just in
know?
her power, in her boundaries, like, no, I don't want to go.
Yeah,
That's
like,
it. That's what you asked.
no explanation, no text back, no like, "Yeah, but maybe tomorrow," none of that. And because she's that way, it's not offensive to anyone. It's actually just like, "No, she said no." Or, it's because she's in her own energy.
Yeah, there's no passive aggressiveness behind it. There's no energy behind it. Just like, no,
No. No, and there's no, like, you don't even have to wonder with her, like, did they mean it? And that's, like, the greatest gift you can give someone.
that's so beautiful. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
So beautiful.
the gift of masculine energy. It's a really big gift to everyone.
Well, Rita, where can all my listeners find you?
Yes. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. And easiest would be Instagram, which is my name, Rita Ellen Mirchandani, just my full name, or my website, Rita Ellen Mirchandani. Pretty much everything's all under my name. So if you Google that, you'll find me. And I'm just so grateful that we got this time today to connect and to be in each other's energy. It felt like it flew by. And thank you to everyone who's listening. I'm grateful to have had the chance to interact with your community.
Thank you so much, Rita. When I'm just like so inspired by you, and I'm so grateful to be able to learn from you and be connected to you and to share and co create the space for all the listeners who are going to just receive this beautiful wisdom.
I learned a lot just from being in your energy today. I really did. And like, it's a mutual, like, heartfelt gratefulness. So thank you so much for
Rita,
having me.
thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Thank you, guys.
Bye.